The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction. And Ambassador Park Yuna had never felt smaller in her entire life. She stood at the human delegation's platform, a tiny circle of metal floating among hundreds of others, each one carrying representatives from species that had sailed between stars when humanity still believed the Earth was flat. Beside her stood Admiral Kang Seo-jun in his formal uniform, his face calm but his eyes burning with quiet intensity as he watched the proceedings unfold. The matter before this council is simple, High Counselor Drethvan announced from his elevated position at the center of the chamber, his voice echoing through translation devices worn by every delegate. The Hurricane Swarm has consumed 14 systems in the outer territories and shows no sign of stopping. The Volnoxy leader was tall and thin, with skin like polished obsidian and forearms that he used to gesture dramatically as he spoke. The Volnoxy Dominion will lead the military response. He continued, our fleets are the finest in the galaxy, forged through 10,000 years of warfare and technological advancement. Ambassador Park activated her platform speaking light and waited to be recognized. Drethan's dark eyes found her, and his thin mouth curved into something that might have been a smile on a kinder face. The council recognizes the representative from Earth, he said, drawing out the word Earth as though it tasted strange on his tongue. Thank you, High Counselor, Park Yuna said, keeping her voice steady and professional. Earth requests permission to deploy our 7th Expeditionary Fleet alongside the Volnoxy forces in this defensive operation. Silence fell across the chamber for exactly 3 seconds. Before the laughter began, it started with a few scattered chuckles from the platforms nearest to the human delegation. But it spread like fire through dry grass until the entire assembly hall rang with the sound of alien amusement. Park Yuna did not flinch, and Admiral Kang remained motionless as a statue carved from stone. Forgive me, Drethvan said, though his tone suggested he found nothing to forgive. But I must have misunderstood the translation. Did the humans just offer to fight alongside the Volnoxy? That is correct, Park Yuna replied. Your species has been traveling between stars for what, 80 years? Drethvan asked, his forearms spreading wide in theatrical disbelief. My personal guard carries weapons older than your entire civilization's spacefaring history. More laughter rippled through the chamber, and Park Yuna noticed that even species she had considered friendly were struggling to hide their amusement. The Sindari have been spacefaring for 6,000 years, called out another counselor from across the hall. And even we would not presume to stand beside the Volnoxy against a swarm incursion. Perhaps the humans could provide refreshments for the victory celebration, someone else suggested. And this drew the loudest laughter, yet Admiral Kang leaned close to Park Yuna's ear. Permission to speak, he murmured. Denied, she whispered back. We cannot afford to make enemies here, not yet. The Admiral straightened, but his hands had curled into fists at his sides. High Counselor Drethvan raised his arms for silence, and the chamber slowly quieted. The Council appreciates Earth's enthusiasm, he said, and his tone made clear that he appreciated nothing of the sort. But this is not a matter for children playing at war. The Volnoxy will handle this infestation, and by dawn tomorrow, the Hurricane threat will be nothing more than an unpleasant memory. I call for a vote, another counselor announced, on whether to include Earth in the military coalition. The voting was swift and brutal. 412 species voted against Earth participation, 17 abstained, including Counselor Mira Talani of the Sindari Union, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable as she declined to raise her hand. Either way, 0 voted in favor. The motion fails, Drethvan declared with obvious satisfaction. Earth will remain in its assigned sector and leave the real fighting to those who know how to wage war. Ambassador Park bowed her head slightly in acknowledgement, maintaining diplomatic protocol even as humiliation burned in her chest. "The Council's decision is noted," she said. "Earth will comply." She turned and walked toward the exit, Admiral Kang falling into step beside her as they passed Drethvon's platform. The High Counselor called out one final time, "Do not feel ashamed. Little humans," he said, loud enough for the entire chamber to hear. "In another 1,000 years, you might develop into something worth noticing. Until then, watch and learn from your betters." Admiral Kang stopped walking. Park Yuna grabbed his arm. "Don't," she said. Quietly, the Admiral took a deep breath and continued. Toward the exit without looking back, they walked in silence through the station's corridors until they reached the human diplomatic quarters. And only when the door sealed behind them did Admiral Kang allow his composure to crack. "They laughed at us," he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "We offered to fight and die beside them. And they laughed." "I know," Park Yuna said, sinking into a chair and rubbing her temples. "What happens now?" "Now we wait," she replied. "We follow the Council's orders and hope the Velnoxi are as powerful as they claim." 6 hours later, Admiral Kang was awakened by an emergency transmission. Read the report 3 times before he believed it. The entire Velnoxi fleet, over 2,000 of the galaxy's finest warships, had been destroyed in less than 4 hours. The Hurricane swarm was 3 times larger than anyone had estimated, and it was heading toward populated space as Kang stood in the darkness of his quarters. His communication console began lighting up with distress signals from 12 different star systems. Millions of lives were crying out for help, and the only fleet close enough to respond was the one the Council had just told to stay home. The Admiral reached for his uniform. Dawn was still hours away, but the longest night of his life had just begun. The Earth Defense Council chamber had never been so quiet, and President Cho Han-yul had never seen so many tired faces gathered in one place. Admirals and generals sat around the curved table, their uniforms wrinkled from being pulled on in haste, their eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the spread of the Hurricane swarm across the outer territories. "Give me the numbers," President Cho said, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. Admiral Kang So-jun stood and activated his datapad. "The Velnoxi committed 2,300 warships to the engagement," he reported. "They lasted 3 hours and 47 minutes before complete destruction. Current estimates place the swarm at approximately 6 million individual craft, ranging from small fighters to carriers the size of moons." General Bae Min-ho, commander of Earth's ground forces and Admiral Kang's oldest friend, let out a long breath. "And what do we have?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "The 7th Expeditionary Fleet consists of 192 combat-ready vessels," Kang replied. "If I pull ships from patrol duty and training exercises, I can raise that number to 214. 200 ships against 6 million. Someone muttered from the far end of the table. "The Council has ordered us to remain in our sector," the Minister of Foreign Affairs reminded everyone. "If we deploy without authorization, we will be in direct violation of galactic law. And if we don't deploy, 12 inhabited systems will be consumed within the next 72 hours, Admiral Kang shot back. "We are talking about billions of lives. Lives that belong to species who laughed at us just hours ago," the minister replied. President Cho raised her hand, and the argument stopped immediately. "Captain Yoon," she said, addressing a young woman seated near the wall. "I understand you have something to show us." Captain Yoon Jisoo stood nervously, clearly unused to addressing such a gathering. "Yes, Madam President," she said, walking to the display and uploading her files. "I have been studying the Hurricane for the past 2 years, and I believe I have found a weakness." The hologram shifted to show a massive organic structure pulsing with bioluminescent light. "The swarm operates through a coordination node," Yoon explained. This central structure broadcasts commands to every Huracan vessel within range. Without it, individual ships lose their unified purpose and begin acting on basic instinct alone. Basic instinct meaning what exactly? General Bay asked, meaning they would scatter, fight among themselves, and become easy targets for conventional weapons, Yoon said. The problem is that the coordination node is located at the heart of the swarm, surrounded by the densest concentration of enemy forces, so we would have to fight through millions of ships just to reach it. Admiral Kang said thoughtfully, "Yes, sir. But if we succeed, the entire swarm falls apart." Silence returned to the chamber as everyone processed this information. What are our chances? President Cho asked. Captain Yoon hesitated before answering. Honestly, Madam President, the odds are not good. A direct assault would require perfect coordination, incredible sacrifice, and more luck than any reasonable person would count on. But it is possible? Yes, ma'am, it is possible. President Cho stood and walked to the window overlooking Luna's gray surface, her hands clasped behind her back. I remember the day we made first contact, she said quietly. I was 12 years old, watching the broadcast with my grandmother. She held my hand and told me that humanity was about to discover whether we were alone in the universe. She turned to face the council. We learned that day that we were not alone. But we also learned something else. We learned that we were late to a party that had been going on for millions of years. We were the newcomers, the children, the ones who had to prove ourselves worthy of a seat at the table. Madam President, the foreign minister began. But she silenced him with a look. They laughed at us, she continued. They told us we were too young and too weak to matter. And now those same people are dying. And they are calling out for help that their own allies cannot provide. She walked back to the table and placed her hands flat on its surface. We could wait, she said. We could follow the council's orders and let the swarm come to us. We would have weeks to prepare. And perhaps we could mount a better defense on our own territory? Or? Admiral Kang asked, or we could go now. We could risk everything to save people who showed us nothing but contempt. We could prove that humanity is not defined by how others treat us, but by how we choose to act. General Bay leaned forward. Even if we win, the council will punish us for defying their orders. Perhaps, President Cho acknowledged. But I did not take this office to keep humanity safe at the cost of its soul. We help because it is right, not because we will be rewarded. She looked around the table, meeting every pair of eyes. I am authorizing deployment of the 7th Expeditionary Fleet and all available support vessels, she declared. Admiral Kang, you will have overall command. Your mission is to reach and destroy the Huracan coordination node by any means necessary. Admiral Kang rose to his feet and saluted. Understood. Madam President, one more thing, she added as he turned to leave. Bring as many of our people home as you can. I will do my best. I know you will. 2 hours later, the fleet was assembled and ready. Admiral Kang stood on the bridge of the flagship Dokdo, watching as 200 human vessels formed up around him. His communication officer reported incoming transmissions from the Galactic Council demanding they stand down. Shall I respond, sir? She asked. No, Kang replied. There is nothing left to say. He gave the order, and one by one, the ships jumped to hyperspace behind them. Earth grew small and distant. Ahead of them waited impossible odds and certain death for many. But they went anyway, because that was what humans did. The fleet traveled in silence through the darkness between stars, running without active sensors or communications to avoid detection by Huracan scouts. Admiral Kang Seo-jun stood at the command center of the Dokdo, watching the tactical display that showed his 200 ships as tiny blue dots moving through an ocean of red. The red dots represented known swarm positions, and there were so many that parts of the display looked like solid crimson walls. Admiral, Lieutenant Shin Yoonji said quietly from her communication station. I am picking up distress signals on the emergency frequencies. From where? Everywhere, sir. Sindari colonies mostly. But also Velnoxy civilian stations and a few species I did not recognize. She paused, and Kang could see her struggling to maintain her composure. Sir, I can hear them dying. Kang walked over to her station and placed a hand on her shoulder. Can you identify specific locations? Yes, sir. There is a Sindari farming world about 3 light years from our current position. They have maybe 6 hours before the swarm reaches them. How many people? Approximately 400,000, mostly agricultural workers and their families. The Admiral closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of command pressing down on him like a physical force. We cannot stop, he said finally. If we divert now, we lose our window to reach the coordination node. I understand. Sir, no, you don't, Kang replied. And I hope you never have to. Keep monitoring the frequencies, but do not respond. We cannot give away our position. He returned to the command center as the sounds of distant screaming continued to play softly through Yoonji's headset. 3 hours later, Commander Lee Tae-young of the destroyer Gwangjae-do requested a private channel. Kang accepted the connection and saw his fellow officer's weathered face appear on the screen. Admiral, my crew is struggling, Lee admitted. They joined the fleet to protect people, and now they are listening to massacres they cannot prevent. I know. Commander, my crew feels the same. Do you truly believe we can succeed? Lee asked. 200 ships against millions. Even if we reach the node, the odds of actually destroying it are. I know the odds, Kang interrupted gently. I have known them since we left Earth, but I also know that doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way, we have a chance. And if we fail, then we fail having tried, which is more than anyone expected of us. Lee was quiet for a long moment. The Council will not forgive this, he said finally. Even if we win, they will punish Earth for defying their authority. Let them, Kang replied. History will remember that we came when no one else would. That matters more than any council vote. The commander nodded slowly. I will speak to my crew. Admiral, we will be ready when the time comes. I never doubted it. The connection ended, and Kang called for Dr. Wang Minseo, the xenobiologist who had first identified the swarm's weakness. The scientist arrived looking exhausted but alert, her tablet clutched tightly in both hands. Doctor, I need you to brief the senior officers on what we will face at the coordination node. Of course. Admiral. She connected her tablet to the display, and the image of the massive organic structure filled the room. The coordination node is approximately 40 kilometers in diameter, she began. It is not a machine in any traditional sense, but rather a living organism that has evolved or been engineered to broadcast commands across vast distances. How do we destroy it? Captain Yoon Ji-soo asked, having been assigned to the briefing as the fleet's tactical coordinator. The outer shell is extremely dense, capable of absorbing direct hits from most conventional weapons, Wang replied. However, there are openings throughout the surface, biological vents that allow the node to regulate its internal temperature. So we fly inside and blow it up from within. Yoon concluded. That is the theory. Yes, but the vents are narrow and protected by automated defense systems. Any ship that enters will face constant attack from the moment it breaches the outer shell. How many ships would we need to guarantee destruction? At least one, carrying enough ordnance to rupture the central neural cluster. But realistically, we should plan for multiple attempts. The first ships through will likely be destroyed before reaching the target. Silence fell over the assembled officers. I will lead the strike team, Captain Yoon said quietly. Admiral Kang looked at her with surprise. You are a tactical officer, not a combat pilot. I am also the person who identified this weakness. Sir, I know the node structure better than anyone else in this fleet, and I will have the best chance of finding the right target once inside. You understand this is likely a one-way mission. I understand. Sir, but if we fail, millions more will die. That is not something I can live with. Kang studied her face for a long moment. Seeing no fear, only determination. Very well, Captain. You will command the strike team aboard the frigate turtle ship. Select your crew from volunteers only. Thank you. Admiral, do not thank me yet. The briefing continued for another hour, covering approach vectors, diversionary tactics, and contingency plans for a dozen different scenarios. When it finally ended, the officers returned to their ships to prepare. Admiral Kang remained alone on the bridge, watching the stars streak past as the fleet continued its silent journey. In 6 hours, they would arrive at the Catharan system. In 6 hours, the battle would begin, and by dawn, one way or another, everything would be decided. The Catharan system was drowning in enemies. Admiral Kang Yeo-jun stared at the tactical display as his fleet emerged from hyperspace, and for one terrible moment, he felt his courage waver. The Hurricane swarm filled space like a living storm. Millions of organic vessels, ranging from fighter-sized creatures to monstrous carriers that pulsed with sickly bioluminescent light. In the center of it all sat the coordination node, a moon-sized brain surrounded by the densest concentration of defenders Kang had ever seen. All ships report ready. Admiral, his executive officer announced. Kang took a deep breath and straightened his spine. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Execute attack pattern Delta. All ships advance. 200 human vessels surged forward into the wall of enemies. The first minutes were Kaioshirokan fighters swarmed around the human ships like angry insects, their organic weapons spitting streams of corrosive acid and kinetic projectiles. The destroyer Sejong took a direct hit to its engine section and exploded in a ball of flame. The cruiser Incheon lost shields and began venting atmosphere from a dozen breaches, but the human ships kept moving, their formation tight and disciplined as they pushed deeper into enemy territory. Gwanggaedo, cover our port flank, Kang commanded. Chung Magang, clear a path for the strike team. Commander Lee's voice crackled over the communication channel. Understood. Admiral, we will hold them as long as we can. The Gwanggaedo swung into position, its weapons blazing as it intercepted a wave of Hurricane bombers heading for the fleet's vulnerable center. Captain Yoon Ji-soo watched from the bridge of the turtle ship as the battle raged around her. The frigate was tucked safely behind the main formation, waiting for the moment when a path to the coordination node would open. Strike team. Status report, she called out. All systems green. Captain, her weapons officer replied. Fighter escorts standing by, added Pilot Sergeant No Dongwook over the radio, his squadron of 12 fighters forming a protective shell around the turtle ship. Good. Stay sharp. When we move fast on the Dokdo. Admiral Kang watched his fleet bleeding and dying around him. 40 ships gone in the first hour, 60 in the second. But they were making progress, slowly carving a corridor through the swarm toward the coordination node. Admiral, the Jungagong is requesting permission to execute ramming maneuver, the communications officer reported. They have lost propulsion and weapons, but their reactor is still active. Khan closed his eyes for just a moment. Permission granted. Tell them they will be remembered. The damaged battleship accelerated on its remaining thrusters, plowing into a Hurricane carrier 10 times its size. The resulting explosion tore a hole in the enemy formation that would take minutes to close. Strike team. Now is your chance, Kang announced. All ships, cover their approach. The turtle ship shot forward like an arrow released from a bow, with Sergeant No's fighters screening its advance. Hurricane interceptors converged on them from every direction. The first fighter in the escort went down almost immediately. Torn apart by concentrated fire, the second followed seconds later. "Keep moving," Captain Yoon ordered. Her voice steady despite the destruction around her. "We stop. We die." Commander Lee's Guangado appeared alongside them. Its hull scarred and burning, but its weapons still firing. "We will clear the path." "Captain," Lee said, "get to that node." "Commander, your ship cannot take much more damage." "I know. Now go." The Guangado threw itself between the turtle ship and an incoming wave of Harukin, absorbing hits that would have destroyed the smaller frigate. Captain Yoon watched the destroyer's shields fail and its armor begin to melt under concentrated fire. "Thank you, Commander," she whispered. The coordination node loomed before them now, its surface covered with biological weapons that began tracking the approaching ship. "Sergeant, no. I need those defense systems neutralized." "On it." "Captain." The remaining fighters broke formation and attacked the node's surface guns, drawing fire away from the turtle ship one by one. The fighters fell. Sergeant No was the last to go. His final transmission a simple "good luck, Captain," before his ship disappeared in a flash of light. The turtle ship reached the nearest vent opening with its hull breached in 3 places and half its systems failing. "We are going in," Yoon announced. "All hands, brace for impact." The frigate plunged into the coordination node's interior. Inside was a nightmare of organic tissue and automated defenses. Tendrils reached for the ship while internal guns sprayed projectiles at every exposed surface. "Target located." The sensor officer shouted, 50 kilometers ahead. The central neural cluster. Divert all remaining power to engines and weapons. Yoon commanded. The turtle ship screamed through the node's interior, taking hit after hit as it raced toward its target. 20 kilometers, 10 kilometers, 5. "Captain, the hull is failing. Hold together just a little longer." 1 kilometer. The neural cluster filled the view screen, a massive ball of pulsing organic matter that controlled millions of Harukin vessels across dozens of star systems. "Fire everything." Captain Yoon ordered. The turtle ship unleashed every weapon it had left. Missiles, torpedoes, and energy beams slammed into the neural cluster in a concentrated barrage that lit up the node's interior like a second sun. Cluster ruptured. A shockwave tore through the coordination node, and Captain Yoon felt her ship begin to break apart around her. But through the view screen, she could see the light fading from the cluster, its commands going silent forever. Outside, Admiral Kang watched in awe as the Harukin swarm suddenly lost all coordination ships that had been attacking in perfect formation. Began spinning aimlessly. Carriers crashed into their own fighters. Entire squadrons turned on each other in confused fury. "The node is destroyed," someone on the bridge shouted. "They are falling apart." Kang allowed himself one moment of relief before snapping back to command mode. "All ships, press the attack. Hunt them down before they can regroup." As the sun of Cathar rose over the nearest planet, casting golden light across the battlefield, the human fleet tore through the scattered remnants of the swarm. The impossible had happened. Humanity had won. The battle was over, but the work had just begun. Admiral Kang Seo-jun stood on the bridge of the Dokdo as damage reports flooded in from every corner of his battered fleet of the 214 ships that had jumped into the Cath-Oran system. Only 128 remained operationally. His 6 vessels destroyed, thousands of crew members dead, and yet somehow, against all odds, they had won. "Admiral, we are receiving distress calls from nearby systems," Lieutenant Shin Yoonji reported, her voice raw from exhaustion. "Civilian populations that were cut off by the swarm. They need food, medical supplies, evacuation assistance. What is our supply situation?" "Limited, sir, but we have enough to help the most critical cases." Kang nodded and opened a fleet-wide channel. Attention all ships. This is Admiral Kang. The Hurricane Coordination Node has been destroyed, and the swarm is scattering, but our mission is not complete. There are people out there who need our help, and we will not abandon them." He paused, looking at the tired faces of his bridge crew. "I know you are exhausted. I know many of you have lost friends today, but right now, we are the only ones who can reach these colonies in time. So we keep going, because that is what we do." Kang out. Over the next 72 hours, the human fleet spread across 12 star systems, delivering supplies, evacuating wounded, and hunting down the last pockets of disorganized. Hurricane ships that could barely fly pushed themselves to their limits to reach isolated outposts. Medical teams worked around the clock treating alien species they had never encountered before, and everywhere they went, the humans were met with stunned disbelief. "You came for us," a Sindari colony administrator said as human shuttles delivered food to her starving population. "After everything the council said, after the way we treated you, you came anyway. We were in the area," the supply officer replied with a tired smile on the fourth day. Admiral Kang received a transmission from Earth. "The council has convened an emergency session," Ambassador Park Yuna informed him. "They are demanding to know why we violated their directive. And there are some who are calling for sanctions against humanity. What do you need from me?" "I need you to come back, Admiral. The council needs to see the face of the man who saved them." Kang looked at his ship, still scarred from battle, and his crew, still working to help those in need. "I will be there," he said 1 week later. The Galactic Assembly Hall was silent as the human delegation entered, but it was a very different silence than before. This time, there was no laughter, no contempt, no dismissive smiles. Every eye in the chamber followed Admiral Kang and Ambassador Park as they walked to their platform, still wearing the same uniforms they had worn during the battle, still carrying the weight of everything they had sacrificed. High Counselor Drethvan rose from his seat, his dark features twisted with barely contained anger. "The humans have violated galactic law," he declared. "They deployed military forces without council authorization and interfered in an operation that was clearly under Volnoxy jurisdiction. The Volnoxy jurisdiction was destroyed in less than 4 hours." Someone called out from across the chamber. Drethvan's forearms trembled with rage. "That is irrelevant. The law is clear, and the humans must face consequences for their defiance. May I speak?" The voice came from Counselor Mira Talani of the Sindari Union, the same delegate who had abstained from the vote against Earth just 2 weeks earlier. She stood on her platform, her normally quiet demeanor replaced by something harder. "I have received testimonies from 347 Sindari colonies," she announced. "Colonies that would have been consumed by the swarm if the humans had not intervened. I have also received reports from Volnoxy civilian stations, from Korthan mining outposts, from dozens of other species that owe their survival to Earth's fleet." She turned to face Drethvan directly. "The High Counselor speaks of jurisdiction and authority, but I speak of 4 billion lives that still exist because humanity chose to act when we told them to stay home." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "I move to formally recognize Earth's contribution to galactic security," Talani continued. "And I move to grant humanity full military partnership status within the Council framework." Drethvan slammed his hands on his podium. "You cannot be serious. These are children playing at being warriors. They got lucky, nothing more." "Lucky?" Admiral Kang's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "We lost 86 ships. Counselor, we lost thousands of crew members. Good men and women who volunteered to fight for people who had done nothing but mock them. We flew into impossible odds because it was the right thing to do, not because we expected to win." He stepped forward on his platform. "You called us children. You said we would learn nothing from watching you. Well, we did watch. We watched your mighty fleet fall in less than 4 hours. We watched your council debate politics while worlds burned. And then we decided to act. You defied our authority. Drethvon hissed. Yes, we did, and we would do it again. Because some things matter more than authority. Some things matter more than law. When innocent people are dying, and you have the power to help, you help. That is what humanity believes. And that is what humanity will always do. The chamber erupted in competing voices, some supporting the humans. Others demanding punishment. Ambassador Park raised her hand and waited for quiet. The council has a choice, she said calmly. You can punish Earth for saving your people, and history will remember that. Or you can recognize that we have proven ourselves worthy of partnership. And we can move forward together. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species after species. You asked what humanity brings to this council. Now, we bring the willingness to sacrifice for others, even when those others have given us nothing but contempt. We bring the courage to act when action is needed, regardless of the cost. The vote was called. 382 species voted in favor of partnership. 30 abstained only. The Velnoxy voted against. Drethvon was removed from his position the following day. His failure and arrogance no longer tolerable to his own people. Admiral Kang was offered command of a new joint defense fleet, a position that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. He accepted, but made one request. Read the names, he said. Every human who died in the battle read their names into the council record, so they will never be forgotten. And so, for the first time in galactic history, the assembly hall fell silent as 4,000 human names were spoken aloud when the last name had been read. Admiral Kang stood and addressed the council one final time. They laughed at us because we were young, he said. They will remember us because we were brave. Outside the great windows of the assembly hall, human and alien ships flew in formation, their running lights blinking in unified rhythm. A new era had begun, and humanity would never be underestimated again.